I once asked a seminary student why they wanted to be a preacher, and I'll never forget their answer. They said, because every time I talk to someone, it seems like the conversation turns into an argument, but no one's allowed to talk back during a sermon. Now, I'm pretty sure that student was joking, but when I think about it, I'm a little sympathetic to that. I mean, these days, it is easy to find ourselves in an argument even when we didn't intend to. I mean, we've always had a whole lot of things to disagree about and discuss and argue about, from politics to religion to culture. But then the pandemic came, and all of a sudden just offering to shake someone's hand became this charged event that could spark a conflict over distancing and positivity rates and everything else having to do with the pandemic. And of course, for us United Methodists, there's more. I mean, let's put it this way. If you feel like you have too many Facebook friends, just post on Facebook anything about General Conference and, well, that'll solve your problem, won't it? I mean, it's no wonder this student wanted to walk into a room full of people who weren't allowed to talk back. But I don't think I really have to tell you, I don't think I'm informing you of anything when I say that while a good sermon, or say a virtual monologue, while those can be helpful things to hear, to learn from, they're not near enough at all. We need two-way communication because we need relationships in our lives. Back in John 17, in Jesus' high priestly prayer, he says a lot of things that he is hoping for his disciples and all those who will follow him. He prayed that we would be one with the Father as he was, that we would be united together, and that we would be sent out into the world full of joy and love and the very presence of God. All of that stuff involves relationship. And relationship, as we all know, involves two-way communication. So no, if we want to live any kind of life worth living, we need relationships with God and with each other. And you simply can't have a relationship when only one person's doing the talking. It's a problem, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, we want what Jesus wants for us. We want unity founded on joy and love and the presence of God among us. That's what we want. What we have looks a lot more like a broken and twisted landscape full of conversational landmines. What we need is a way forward, a way to navigate the landmines and get us to the place where we have the kind of unity Jesus prayed for. I think I know a little bit of how to get there. Not because I'm super smart, I'm not, but because of something this church has had to go through. I'm here at Somerset First United Methodist Church, and I want to tell you about a story about a special group of people here. See, not all that many years ago, this church went through a very messy and very painful conflict. When the dust had settled from all of that, there were a lot fewer people in these pews, there were a lot fewer dollars in the offering plate, and there were a lot fewer hopes for the future. It was so bad that the only hope this church had to avoid an untimely and tragic death was to figure out real quick who it was, what it was called to do, and how to be faithful to both. And so a group of very different people gathered together to try and figure that out. And they were very different. I mean, some were young, others much older. Some were very established members of this church. Some were newbies. Some were traditionalist and others progressive. In fact, the only thing that this whole group had in common was that every member of it was incredibly opinionated. I know, right? Sounds like the perfect recipe for even more conflict. But that's not what happened. Now, see, there was one thing that helped them get past all of that. They had everything to lose, and they knew it. And so with everything to lose, this group realized very quickly that they needed to find a few more things in common other than an opinionated personality. Thankfully, they found three. First, this group realized that in order to move forward, to have any kind of a future, they needed all hands on deck. I mean, after all, if anyone else left, there might not be enough people and money here to keep this church alive. And so they agreed amongst themselves that nothing about any of them or anyone else should be able to disqualify that person from being a part of this church family. They made it an official value of the church. It says, "We welcome all people as bearers of God's image and as cherished members of God's family, regardless of age, gender, race, nationality, ability, legal status, or sexual orientation." Now, you know there's disagreement on what that meant, right? There were words said about what welcoming and cherishing really look like. There's not agreement on all of that stuff at all. But still, they shared the same goal: a church family where everyone can feel at home. Second, this group admitted to each other that while they wanted to keep growing in faith, while they were willing to keep growing in faith, they had no idea how to do it on their own anymore. Now, you got to understand that members of this group had decades of church service behind them and Sunday school behind them and worship behind them. I mean, some of this group, they were pillars of the church. They were saints of the faith. They were sanctified disciples of Jesus. But still, even they realized that to keep growing, to keep walking this spiritual journey, they now needed perspectives around them different from their own. And they found out something really interesting. I mean, it turns out in this group that the younger folk in it, turns out they needed wisdom from their elders who saw that coming. But at the same time, the elders in the group also realized that the younger ones, that they saw needs and possibilities that the older ones couldn't see. It turns out that the established members who had been here for a while, that they had been running the church the way they had been for some really good reasons, actually. But also it turned out that once the newbies understood that history and that context, that they still had some really good ideas for how to do things differently. And it turned out that once the traditionalists and the progressives started talking about what they were fighting for instead of what they were fighting against, there was a lot less to argue about. Now, don't let me paint too rosy a picture here, right? I know there was still disagreements. They were still there. There were still fierce disagreements to be had, right? There were some tense moments in this group, and there were some long debates that didn't go anywhere. But in spite of all of that, it turns out that for this group, there was a world of difference between debating a clear issue of disagreement and waging war against an all-encompassing ideology. And it turns out that when this group stayed focused on the disagreement instead of the ideology, well, they did have a chance to learn and grow because of each other. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, this group learned that in order for everyone to be welcome and cherished in this church family, in order for them to help each other grow, that they needed to figure out how to keep thinking the best of each other while they learned each other's language. I know this one's a little weird. Let me unpack this one for you. See, I can't tell you how often this group would debate and discuss something for an hour or more, only to realize at the end that they basically agreed with each other. They just talked about it very differently. Again, I'm not saying they didn't have disagreements. They had plenty of disagreements. But what I mean is that often the disagreement, it didn't actually lie in what person A over here was trying to say, but rather in what person B over here thought person A was trying to say. But the only way for person B to actually figure out that they had a lot in common, they had to step back. They had to pause, calm themselves down, take a few deep breaths. Remember that person A over here was actually not an evil, idiotic heretic, but actually a sanctified saint of Jesus, and work it out with them. Now, I was not immune here, right? More than once, a member of this group would find me after a Sunday sermon and say, "Hey, Pastor, I know you, and I love you, and I think I know what you were trying to say today, and I am 100% with you on that, but you need to understand that what I think you were trying to say here is not at all what I heard you saying. And if I did not know you so well and love you so much, I would be so furious with you right now." Now, I'll tell you, those are hard words to hear as a preacher. But I can't tell you how grateful I was that that person continued to think the best of me, even when every fiber of their being was screaming about what I just said. That's the final lesson this group realized. That in order for everyone to be welcome, in order to help each other grow in faith, they had no choice but to always keep thinking the best of each other while they learned each other's language. That's how we navigate the landmines. That's how we get from the landscape we are in to that place where we have unity based in joy and love and the presence of God in our relationships. First, we have to decide that all people are indeed welcome in our family. Second, we have to admit that we need all those people to keep growing in faith. And finally, we have to commit to thinking the best of those people while working to learn their language and trusting them to do the same for us. Now, I've been blessed here at this church to enjoy the fruit of that hard work over these last years. As I have grown closer with church members here that I would never have thought that I would love and appreciate the way I do. You know, the United Methodist here in this church have blessed me in ways I could never have imagined and honestly probably still don't fully appreciate. It is a privilege and a blessing to have them in my life. And that's why I have decided to remain United Methodist. And that's why I want to invite you to remain United Methodist as well. Thanks for listening. God bless.